It's 12 noon, and this is City Line. Hi, I'm Jackie Hall.
And I'm B.T. Bentley. We hear so much about AIDS and its effect on victims, but what effect does it have on those who lose loved ones to this fatal virus?
Today on City Line, we'll meet a mother whose son recently died of AIDS.
We'll find out how her son's disease affected her relationship with her family and friends.
How has she coped with the loss of her son, and what kind of responsibility does she feel a family has to a member stricken with AIDS?
A memorial fund has been established in the name of a communications pioneer. It's the Larry Dean Memorial Fund. I'm T. Montier, and today on Newscap we'll explore the fund's objective.
Jazz lovers front and center, because today I'll be featuring the Manhattan Transfer, a jazz ensemble that has crossed over into mainstream music with phenomenal success. I'm Harold Anthony, and on today's show I'll have this plus updates on events happening all around town.
Join Jackie and me as we talk to a mother whose son died of AIDS.
My son died of AIDS. Up next on City Line.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being with us once again on City Line. You know, the AIDS epidemic is still of grave concern to the country, and up till now we've heard so much about the victims of AIDS, the length of time that they suffer and how they get the disease and so forth. But not a lot has been said about the family members, those who lose loved ones to this disease, and what type of effect that it might have on them. With us today is a young woman we will call Barbara. Barbara has asked not to be identified because of the misconceptions that continue surrounding the disease called AIDS. Barbara, I want to thank you for being with us. How long ago was it that your son died?
About 2 months.
Just 2 months. Mm-hmm. And let's make this clear first of all. Your son contracted the disease through a blood transfusion, is that
Yes.
correct? How long ago was it detected?
I think it's in '85 when he first came down. When they he had a blood transfusion, and he taken sick, and we took him to Hopkins, and the doctors at the time they didn't know what it was because he kept making tests, and they said that he had a virus. And I guess maybe a couple weeks and I kept going. We, kept going back and everything. When they really diagnosed it as being AIDS. And he let me know, one of the doctors told me that somewhere within that time when he had blood transfusion, he must picked up this virus.
Barbara, what was your first thought when you heard that he indeed had AIDS? What went through your mind? How did you feel?
By me being a nurse, I had heard so much. I was frightened. And it hurt me. It hurted me for the simple reason I had heard so much about AIDS, and we had, at the hospital where I worked at, they had some patients there. And I was always with this feeling like other parents, oh, I hope nothing ever happens to my family. But when they told me this, I was stunned. And I guess I had talked to it must have been about 15 doctors in that room where we were sitting. And so one of the doctors, he says, well, how do you feel? I don't know what he expected for me to say, so I told him, how do I feel? I'm hurt. I'm sad.
Did you ever at any point think that perhaps they had made a mistake and that it really wasn't AIDS at all during that period?
Yes, yes. But we kept going back to the hospital for tests and things like that, and each time it looked like it was getting worse, and they kept saying that's what it was.
What was your son's reaction?
Very hurt young man, very sad, very confused at that time, because he had plans on going back to college. He was one of those young men that, 24 years old, he had a lot to live for. He had so much he wanted to do. He was going to school for fashion, and he was once with the modeling group and things like that. So he had a lot of living to do.
Okay. How about other family members? Who did you choose to tell?
I kept this thing to myself for a long time, for a very long time. And I think my son told his brother. And I told the rest of the family. But I never told my parents.
You think they would not have understood?
Because, no, they wouldn't have, because I figured they were older people, and we would try to spare them as much as we could. So the only thing that I did tell them that he was very ill, and he would be in and out of the hospital, and that he might not live. So they accepted that.
Your son did die.
Yes.
Over what period of time, from the time that that he had the transfusion until the time that he died? What was that length of time?
From, just say, from 85, from last year until September the 21st, because he passed.
So it was just a short period of time?
Yes, just a short period of time.
Okay. We're going to have to take a break right now, but we will return to continue our discussion in just a minute.
Okay.
Please stay with us. We will be right back.
We're back on City Line, and we're talking to Barbara, whose identity is being protected. She lost her son not long ago to AIDS. He was a victim of AIDS in the sense that he received a blood transfusion, and as a result of that, he came down with the disease and he died. Barbara, that's at the point that we stopped and we took a break. As you look back over it, what is it that helped you through the period, and what were some of the thoughts that you had as you saw your son kind of dwindle away before you?
Right now, I'm very bitter. I'm very bitter to the point where, I try to figure out, wonder why it happened to him, because he had so much to live for. He was such a fine young man. Would give you his heart. And then I think about the young kids out here that's hurting people, and I say to myself, why not some of them? Why my son? But then again, I don't want to feel that way. I miss him. I look for him. I find myself looking for him to come home. He was my very best friend.
You say you're bitter. Is there something you feel that
Yeah.
The doctors could or could not have done to have protected him better?
I don't think he could have got no better treatment than he did, because they were very good to him at that hospital. The doctors was very good. He was on the floor that the nurses and things was very concerned. They was so full of love and understanding. And I think if my son had been anywhere else, I don't think I could have went through what I have went through, because they were very supportive to my family. I very bitter with my church.
Why? You feel they did not
Because
support you when they could have?
They didn't. And we were a member there.
Were they aware, Barbara,
Yes.
that you had AIDS?
Yes.
And what did they do? Just simply abandon you?
And
turn
I
your back?
heard from the people, I guess the same day my son died.
Do you think a part of that was their fear?
As time go by now, I imagine it was.
You say that they weren't supportive of you. Do they allow your son to have services there? Or?
No, I didn't even try to have it there. I heard it somewhere. I had a memorial service somewhere else. And maybe the fear of the AIDS, maybe that's what drove him away. I try to look at it like that now, but I don't think I could have been that way. I don't think I could have been that way to a family.
You have concerns now about friends and perhaps neighbors. Is this an outgrowth of the treatment that you received from the church?
Yeah.
And you simply feel that people still lack the understanding of the disease and its repercussions?
Yes. And I guess the fear of unknown, I guess that's just like anything else. If they don't know anything about it, they have a tendency to draw away and be, afraid to come around and things like that. But
Barbara, let me interrupt you for just a bit. As a mother, and realizing that your son had AIDS, what stages did he go through, and how did you feel watching him go through? How did the disease change him physically?
my son was he lost a lot of weight, but his mind was very good, and he had all the hopes of being, getting back on his feet and going back to school and things like that. But
it took its toll.
Yes, and I think my son died a long time ago, because and just going back every day, I would go to the hospital twice a day and things like that. And just to see him like he was, it was killing me too.
So you think that he gave up spiritually some time ago?
Yes, because we did a lot of talking, and he was tired of fighting. And he would always tell me, he said, "Mother, I'm fighting for you." And he was strong.
Okay. Barbara, thank you for your story, and we're going to continue. And as we just finished looking back on the past, we want to now talk about your fight for the future, and we'll get into that after this break. Please stay with us.
Discussing the story of one mother's son who died of AIDS. And joining us now on the set is Mr. Eddie King, Director of Education for the group called HERO. Eddie, just how prevalent is the disease AIDS in terms of victims who get the virus through blood transfusion?
Well, right now that's less than 2%. only a small amount of people, in fact, have actually gotten AIDS or the virus through blood transfusions.
So the prevailing method is still through...
It's still primarily through sexual intercourse and or by shooting a needle in your arm.
Now, Barbara has told us that her son got it through transfusion, and within a rather short time, a matter of months really, he had died. How common is that as a result of getting the disease in the way that he did?
Well, it's quite rare. The problem, in an instance with Barbara, there is an antibody test available, and we would hope, and we had hoped so much, that this test would, of course, provide some type of assistance in letting us know whether or not that antibody was present. And it does. Now, the unfortunate thing about this test is that it wasn't out until March of 1985. So anyone who perhaps had blood, who had a blood transfusion before March of 1985 is a potential risk, not a major risk. I don't want everybody running thinking all of a sudden they're in trouble, because again, the numbers that we're talking about is less than 2%. That's a problem because the test wasn't available until March 1985, and if anybody had a blood transfusion before that time, just a small risk, and unfortunately Barbara's son perhaps was one of those people who was in that small number. Now the other thing is it takes the antibody inside of the body 4 to 6 weeks to build. So if, let's say, someone should take this test between that 4 to 6 week period, then the question is, will the test be able to pick up antibody that hasn't even formed yet? Mm-hmm. And that's a big question. It seems not probable at this moment.
So basically, the test is effective, but only after that 6 week period is lapsed.
Basically, after that 6 week period, an antibody has built up. Now, once it has gotten into the, it's reserved blood, that antibody does get its time to build up, and eventually it's detectable. So I think the problem in most instances with Barbara's son was probably that it was after that, before that March 1985 period.
What sorts of things are being done now, in addition to the test, to reduce that sort of risk, basically in terms of who is allowed and who is not allowed to voluntarily give blood?
Well, we automatically go specifically at risk groups. We don't want gay or bisexual men donating not only blood but any kind of organs. We don't want people who shoot needles in their arms like drug abusers donating blood. And another more important point is we don't want people who are sexual partners of either someone who's gay or bisexual or someone who shoots needles in their arms donating blood or body organs as well.
Okay, you say you don't want gay or bisexual men to donate blood. How can you detect whether or not they are gay or bisexual?
Well,
or the partners of?
Well, we rely a lot on the honesty of the people involved. We can never tell if somebody's gay or bisexual. In fact, you know, with the AIDS cases in Maryland, 20% of them are married men, and they don't meet the stereotypes of someone whom we consider gay, or bisexual for that matter. So what we hope would happen, we have to rely on the honesty, but if that fails, the test doesn't tell us whether somebody's gay or straight. It will tell us whatever that person is into. It won't do that, but it will tell us whether or not they have antibody to the virus in their blood.
There are some states who have actually made it a felony for known carriers of AIDS or the AIDS virus to donate blood without acknowledging that fact. Do you foresee anything like that taking place in Maryland?
No, I really don't, and I don't even think that it's perhaps an acceptable approach here in Maryland. I think that most of those states were acting out of panic and thought, well, we got to do something, and this was the route they chose.
Mm-hmm. Do you know, when you were here before, you created quite a scare, really, in the black community, because before that time, many people were not aware of the large numbers of cases in the black community, and it scared them because a great many people approached us weeks and weeks and weeks after. At that time, you said more than 55% of the cases were black that have been reported in the state of Maryland?
Right.
What is the situation now? Give us an update.
Well, unfortunately, I can't say anything more positive than we still make up the majority of the AIDS cases. But I'm now placed in a precarious position because I have to confront the people that I think are the best people who are going to get my message out there, that I need people to do certain things. And most of that is now going at the clergy.
So it was a 55%
right.
number of cases then. What is the statistical history now?
We still are at 55%. Numerically, we've increased. We're now at, 200. We're at 276 cases to date. And again, what we have to look at is since January 1 of 1985, we've not had less than 12 cases of AIDS per month in the state. And we've not had less than 12, but we've never had more than 25.
All righty. We have a call from home now, and we'd like to talk to our caller. Good afternoon. You're on City Line. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I do have a question. I would like to know how long does it take, or how long, how can you contract, or how just do you know when you have this type of disease? What kind of diagnostics is taken to let you know, and how long does it take for you to catch hold of this disease?
Good question. I think the misconception that most people have is that AIDS is a diagnosis that's made by a blood test. Well, AIDS is a clinical diagnosis. What that means, Jackie and BT, is that a doctor has to go through a series of tests, a battery of tests, to determine whether or not someone has AIDS. It can't be determined by a blood test, and you can't even tell if somebody has AIDS by the symptoms. Just by looking at symptoms, you can't tell. It's just not feasible. It has to be a clinical diagnosis going through a battery of tests that tells the doctor if you do or do not have AIDS.
Barbara, knowing what Eddie has said, does it make you feel any different in terms of your approach to friends and neighbors? Do you think that there will ever be a point when you would be comfortable about them knowing? Do you think that there will be that point of understanding where it wouldn't matter if they knew?
I think as time go by and people get educated to what AIDS is all about, I think I would be a little open, a little relaxed. But now I'm not that relaxed now, but hopefully I'm hoping that things will get a little better and I'll be more relaxed with my family and friends.
How involved were those tests that they administered to your son to detect that he did indeed have AIDS?
Excuse me?
How involved was the testing process? Was it detailed? Was it very involved?
Very involved. And just like he was home and I was carrying him back and forth to the hospital, like for his checkups and things like that. But a lot of those tests, he had to be confined to the hospital. And like he was talking about a battery of tests, I guess they were doing everything, Sometimes it was like tests they would do with his sputum, his blood, his stool. They were checking everything to make sure that it was. And when they really go through those clinics, they don't just tell the people they have it. They really find out everything about it.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take another call. Hi, you're on City Line.
Yes, I would like to ask the young lady how and who helped her overcome this crisis in her life.
Thank you for the call, Barbara.
My family and friends, very close friends.
Are they still very supportive?
Yeah.
Eddie, how have you involved the family of AIDS victims, and is that a key to perhaps easing the difficulties and the pain, the personal pain?
Family is a very important part of easing tension for family and the patient. A lot of times what we find happening is that the family can be, can reject. And, we have instances, for example, of people who are coming home from the military now who not having AIDS, but just having the antibody, and which means nothing right now. And family are putting people out, and we're having to deal with that. And a lot of times we have to go and talk to mothers for the patient, because mothers just don't understand enough about the disease. And And if we can win the mother, it tends that we can get the rest of the family around. But I think out of fear, not out of rejection of love, but out of fear, families sometimes refuse to respond in this crisis. We need them, and I think that's the problem that we have.
Okay, we're going to find out a little bit more about what's happening in terms of education in just a minute. We've got to take a break right now. Please stay with us. We won't return.
We're back on City Line talking about the situation that Barbara has found herself in with her son having died of AIDS, and we're talking about the research and perhaps what's on the horizon in terms of understanding it and combating it. Eddie King of Hero, Barbara mentioned the role of her particular church when they discovered that her son had AIDS. What about the role of the church as you go out to spread the word and to get the participation of churches in our community?
Gee, you put me on the spot.
That's great.
Well, the church, well, I don't know how to respond appropriately. Well, first, I guess the last time I was here, I was telling you I wasn't getting any help from the clergy at all. My report now is that the clergy is coming around. They're being extremely supportive, but I put them in a real precarious position, a very precarious position, because I've explained to them the problem. They have to, the Bible says you can't condone sex. Okay? But I have to say, you don't have to condone sex, but you got to say to these people, who most of whom are coming from your churches, you're going to have to tell them how to have sex safely. How can a minister not condone sex and yet at the same time say you got to do it safely?
But isn't a part of their coming around also that many of their peers, the other ministers are coming down with AIDS and dying of AIDS?
I ain't telling. But
isn't
yes,
that the truth?
That's the truth. In fact, a lot of the clergy are coming around because they're seeing more and more of their membership.
Ministers.
And
ministers.
And some of their fellow clergymen coming down with some of this illness. And I think the church has begun to respond, and I'm real proud of it, and I don't want to leave here today without making that positive statement that I'm real glad that the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance is responding, that the Baptist Ministers Conference is responding. I'm real glad because it's because they have begun to respond, we've made the most positive education advance that we've ever made since we've begun the whole education process in Baltimore.
But particularly in an instance such as was the case with Barbara's son, where the victim contracted the virus through a blood transfusion. I mean, how could the church condemn him for having the disease?
Unfortunately, we get locked into this mentality that God doesn't like it. You're a homosexual if you got AIDS, and I don't know how I can change that perception. I've tried, and I just don't know what else to do other than to say if these churches would give me an opportunity to come and explain to them the problems, I think that they would get a better understanding of what AIDS is and what their role is in this whole entire process.
Okay, let's take another call from someone who wants information. Hi, you're on City Line. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Hi, I've heard the rumor that even through the contact of touching someone, if they have perspired, through perspiration, can you contact the disease that way?
No, you can't. In fact, if I can be quite emphatic and very blunt about it, the only way you're going to get it is actually if you throw somebody under a chair and have sex with them, or you share and shoot a needle, take them in the closet and shoot a needle in their arm with them. All of these other stories and these interesting ways of getting AIDS just don't hold up. You need to have sex. You need to share a needle with somebody.
But Eddie, isn't that what we know right now, and that is not really conclusive?
Well, it's pretty much quite conclusive. Now, for example, let's take this whole issue with spit or saliva. We know now that saliva is not a major way of transmitting this virus, which was an original fear. We know that it's not now. We've cultured the virus out of everything we possibly can, and we were only able to find it, primarily in semen and blood. And people want to make themselves have AIDS, and we can't make them have AIDS. You have to get it a certain way.
What is on the horizon? Is there, what is happening with research? Is there any particular school of thought now in terms of the best approach to
Well, we
treating it?
know that there isn't an aim to get the virus. We gotta come up with some way of controlling the virus. Right now, there are a lot of antiviral drugs out there, a lot of drugs that are experimenting with the virus. We've even gotten some drugs that can manage, and which seems to be the most promising. They can slow down this whole process. It doesn't stop it. It just slows it down, which means that it's going to take a longer time for you to eventually die.
So it's not even curing it.
It's not
obviously.
curing it, but it is having some reaction. At first, we weren't having any reactions at all. We were just experimenting and trying everything in the world, and you were feeling like kind of a human guinea pig. But now we're at least, because of that process, we're seeing some kind of progress, and we hope.
Is that hopeful?
Honestly, doctors say no. It's just something that slows down the process. We expect the nearest estimate of a cure is around, 10 years from now.
Barbara, before we leave, we'd like to kind of end up with you. What message do you have, not only to other mothers, but to the families of AIDS victims? If you could just send a message now.
Well, the message that I have, you got to stick together. Families have got to stick together. Because if you turn your back on them, it's sad when I met a lot of patients that the families had turned their back on. But if you hang in there with them and give them all the support and love, that gets it. And that's all.
We thank you so much for coming here today and sharing your story, and we know that it must have been painful for you. But bless you and continued success to you. And thank you, Eddie King of Hero.
Thank you.
And we hope that the prognosis in terms of AIDS research and so forth is very positive.
We're going to beat this thing.
Great. Thank you for coming by. City Line will take a break right now, and we'll come back with T. Montier in the news desk.
Good afternoon. This week on Newscap, we veer away from our normal format to take a close-up look at the establishment of a memorial fund in the name of a communications pioneer. The Larry Dean Memorial Fund was recently established to continue some of the commitments started by the Dean. And joining me now to discuss the fund is Jonathan Compton, spokesman for the group. Mr. Compton, or better known as Sir Johnny O, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Tell us briefly, Mr. Compton, if you will, basically what the objective of the Larry Dean Memorial Fund is. What is it?
Well, first of all, let me thank you, Ms. Montier, for inviting me in and offering the opportunity to express some of the concerns that Larry had for the future, especially in the communications field with students and, of course, other communicators in the country. At this particular time, the fund has been established through some concerned citizens in the area on a local and national basis. It's a nationwide effort with some of the very fine performers, recording artists, as well as the top communicators that we hear, of course, on our radio and television sets. At this particular time, we are trying to go forth to carry out some of those concerns that the Dean, as he was affectionately known to the friends who were so close to him and his concerns, and we would like to carry those concerns out at this time.
I understand that the fund has some very specific goals and some very specific objectives, such as the establishment of a communications scholarship for students, among other things. Could you share with us what some of those specifics are that the fund will be involved with?
Yes, most definitely. So the first priority is the students, because as you might very well know, when the Dean passed, he was last employed at Morgan State University. Of course, he taught journalism there, gave all the kids the tidbits on communications. On a personal note as well, he tried to offer the other aspects of the business, as far as the advertising, the engineering aspects of it. He, of course, prepared them to be good writers, so in case they would get employed as a news person at a newspaper, even, that they could continue. The scholarship, of course, will reflect on that type of thing.
The scholarship will be given to a communication student?
Well, in some instances, it will be communication students, but also a good student that would be pursuing engineering, broadcast engineering, for instance, and that type of thing.
It's, you know, it's interesting, Mr. Compton, and speaking with those people who knew Larry Dean, they all seem to share a very personal story about the Dean in terms of being motivated by Larry Dean in the communications industry. And I understand that you yourself, you've known Larry Dean, or you knew Larry Dean for 28 years, and he had a very serious commitment to communications. Did he not? Share with us your personal remembrances of Larry Dean.
Well, I, of course, appreciate the opportunity at any time to speak in terms of Larry. Of course, Larry was my mentor, and being Larry's protege, I've had an opportunity to share a lot of his serious thoughts. On a personal note, of course, we more or less looked at the football games on the weekends, like most guys who get together do, sharing a few beers together, although we have enjoyed a lot of things, and in our conversations we have discussed, of course, the business and fun time, as you very well know the guys do, and that type of thing.
Larry Dean started off as a DJ, and you also were a DJ, Sir Johnny O, if we all remember, for those of us who do remember. But Sir Johnny O, tell us, Larry, he was a fun guy, but he also had a very serious concern for DJs, for their future. He felt as though they should get something from the fruits of their labor in terms of what kinds of things?
Exactly right, T. Of course, this is a labor of love for me, and it was a labor of love for Larry, in a struggle that we've had with various radio and television stations to assure that the communicators, when they are through with their booking, as we call it, as a job working in radio or television, that we would secure benefits such as a retirement fund to be created, and of course we could take care of our families once we are away from the public eye, along with, of course, the regular life and health insurance, so that we could feel secure and our families could feel secure in that as well. He wanted the youngsters, as well as some of the fellow communicators, to definitely receive those type of benefits, because he felt that they were bringing something to the stations, being a numbers game, receiving ratings, and of course in communicating with the community and their messages on a public service level.
And speaking to the Dean's wife, Greer Dean, she informed me that Larry had been collecting information and data for years, and that he was in the process of compiling a book on black movement in the communications industry. Will the fund be involved with carrying that book to its next stage?
Well, first I would like to say that Greer Dean, of course, is a most dedicated individual to Larry Dean and also to the community and his efforts in the community. To take that one step further, Larry was involved in compiling all of the data necessary to give the public all the information on the inner workings of the communications industry. This would go beyond Baltimore, of course, throughout the entire country. And in doing so, he had prepared a life story, if you will. We've decided to title this book, The Dean, the First Black Pioneer of the Broadcast Media.
In closing, Mr. Compton, we're quickly running out of time. I know that you briefly discussed with me this national tribute that you are putting together that should be carrying sometime in early May. And you've got some really impressive names connected with that tribute, and at the risk of being a bit premature, let's talk about some of the individuals you're trying to include in that effort.
Well, first and foremost, we have contacted one of Larry's personal friends who, while in Detroit as a disc jockey, Larry had been very instrumental in helping bury Gordy of Motown Records. And of course, Larry was very well known with the Supremes and some of our top stars that we've just recently seen on the American Awards show.
And you also mentioned Arthur Prysock and Nancy Wilson and those kinds of people. You're going to try to get them to come together to perform this national tribute so that you can do what with those monies, fund the scholarship?
Exactly right. Those who can't perform, of course, they do have big monies now, and we've always felt that we've helped them to receive their success, because Larry is a success story within itself, and have helped many of those performers to receive their success and organizing them over the years with their recordings, etc. Okay,
Mr. Compton, in closing, for anyone wishing more information on the Larry Dean Memorial Fund, who can they call or where can they write?
Well, they can call the Larry Dean Memorial Fund at area code 301-367-3501, or they may write the Larry Dean Memorial Fund at P.O. Box 30528, Baltimore, Maryland, 21270, or they can simply ask for Johnny O, and I'll be happy to give them any information that they would like to have.
Sir Johnny O, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Montier.
And that is today's Newscap. I'm T. Montier. More City Line up next. Have a good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Harold Anthony, and on today's edition of the entertainment page, I'll feature one of my all-time favorite groups who specialize in what many people believe to be the only true American art form, jazz. Although jazz is their first love, the Manhattan Transfers are a four-part vocal harmonizing group who are also well known for mastering material from the 20s through the early 60s, including swing, doo-wop, jazz scaz, and pop ballads. The group first formed in 1969 as a jug band style good time group and signed to Capitol Records. They took their name from a novel by John Dos Passos about New York in the 20s. They soon broke up and the only remaining member was Tim Hauser. The new Manhattan Transfer formed in 1972 and soon became as popular as New York's cabaret circuit. Hauser sang with the doo-wop groups as a youth, and later he played in a folk rock band with Jim Croce. Alan Paul was a child actor who had appeared in road company productions of Oliver and Grease. Janis Siegel, who had recorded with the Young Generation, whose popularity peaked in the 1960s. With fourth member Laurel Massey, they released their Atlantic debut album in 1975 and immediately got a summer TV network replacement series, which only lasted a few short weeks. But even with the nostalgic trend of the time, the band didn't sell well in this country, although they had a #1 hit in England and France with Chassé Amour. In 1979, after Massey left and was replaced by Cheryl Benteen, the band began to modernize its look and broaden its audience. Today, the group has found the winning combination of visuals and sounds that has made them one of the most sought-after vocal jazz groups in the country with Killer Joe. While I'm on the subject of jazz, I'd like to remind you that the innovative jazz musician Roy Ayers will be making a special Valentine's appearance on February 14th at Godfrey's new famous ballroom located at 1717 North Charles Street. Roy is credited with such hits as Mystic Voyage, Everybody Loves the Sunshine, and Vibrations, and many hits too numerous to mention. Opening for Roy Ayers will be Morgan State University's own Sides, who appeared on City Line during the Christmas season. There will be 2 shows at 8 p.m. and 12 a.m. For further information, you can call 358-1452. So fellas, why don't you give your sweetheart a night to remember by treating them to the unique sounds of Roy Ayers and Sides. Ladies, you can return the favor by treating your special Valentine to a super special nostalgia review when the Mighty Drifters will join forces with Baby Washington for a Valentine's treat that can't be beat. This cabaret-style night out will be sure to revive old memories when Baby Washington revives some of her old hits that include The Bells, The Time, and an old favorite, That's How Heartaches Are Made. The Drifters will follow up with their old hits that will include On Broadway, There Goes My Baby, and Up on the Roof. Although I'm a little too young to clearly remember some of those hits, I'll be co-hosting the show along with my good friend Billy Taylor of WWIN Radio. So ladies, why don't you spend some money on your honey and meet me at the Winchester Armory Saturday, February 15th from 9 till 2 a.m. For further information, just give Billy Taylor a buzz at 366-1400. Hey, it's okay to call. Just tell him you got his number from Harold. In commemoration of Black History Month, the Walters Art Gallery will present a 19th century black artist exhibition in Harlem photographs by Carl Van Vechten. This exhibit will be featured now through March 2nd at the Walters Art Gallery located at 600 North Charles Street. Among the artists on exhibit is the great Baltimorean Joshua Johnson, who is believed to be the first Afro-American to achieve fame as a portraitist. Robert Scott Duncanson, most noted for portraits and still lifes as well as historical and religious subjects. And Carl Van Vechten, whose photographs depict Afro-Americans who have made significant contributions to the cultural and social life of the United States. Among the artists displayed by Van Vechten are writers James Baldwin, Dizzy Gillespie, athlete Althea Gibson, and more. So for more information on activities, tours, films, and lectures, just call the Walters Art Gallery at 547-9000. And once again, that just about wraps it up for this week's edition of the Entertainment Page. I'm Harold Anthony, hoping you all have a great Sunday.
Thank you, Harold, and we'd also like to thank our guests, Barbara and Eddie King of Hero. If you have any questions and you need answers, please call 685-1180, and that's the number to Hero.
We invite you to join us next week when our guest will be none other than the King of Rap, Mr. Curtis Blow. That's it for today. I'm B.T. Bentley.
I'm Jackie Hall. Have a good Sunday.
Bye-bye.